What is going on, everyone? Welcome to the Stan R. Mitchell Show. My name is Stan, and this week I'm taking a look at some of the biggest stories and headlines and giving you my take on what matters and why. I'll start with Trump's latest poll numbers, then get into several news topics that I think will only make those numbers worse for him. Then we'll jump to the midterms, a trade war with Canada, and how that's going to bring more economic pain while also betraying the conservative cause. Then I'll cover Iran, the looming threat of a potential World War III, and then we will even discuss how Hakeem Jeffries has managed to get himself in some big trouble. As always, there will be timestamps in the episode notes in case you want to jump around. Of course, we got to start with the biggest news this week, which is unfortunately the passing of Dolly Parton. She was a legend across the country and the world. She was born in Sevier County, which is just one county over from where I was born and raised and live currently in Knox County. But she got her start from an even closer tie to me. There was a small little radio show that was put out on Channel 10 News in Knoxville called The Kaz Walker Show. You probably won't hear many people talk about this, but this was one of the first things she ever sang in and made her start, so to speak, in. And the Kaz Walker owned some grocery stores literally a few blocks from where I was raised, and my mom and dad used to talk about having met this guy who started from nothing, started the Kaz Walker Show, where you would just literally buy a 30-minute segment on one of 3 channels back then on a very slow day when you could do that. And my parents had met him, and they would always talk about how Dolly Parton had gotten started on the Kaz Walker Show. Of course, she went on to do much bigger things. She won 11 Grammys, was one of the most popular figures in the world. Obviously, she launched from scratch something that's about 30 minutes from my house called Dollywood. She's given away 300 million books through her imagination library. And to honor her, I thought I would play 2 short tributes. These were the 2 best ones I saw, and they're both very short, so I think you'll enjoy them.
I just try to make life a little better. I try to lift things up when they're down. I write my songs about that sort of thing. You'll find me and my opinions, in a lot of the songs. But most of it's based on love and acceptance and lifting people up. I ask God every day to let me be a blessing to mankind and to uphold Him and to glorify Him. And that's how I go about my day.
No political rallies for you then?
No political rallies for me. I make my joke is that my daddy was a Republican, my mama was a Democrat, and I'm a hypocrite.
So she obviously was big on not dividing the country and on keeping just a beloved place in everyone's heart, whether you were on the left or the right. And obviously, as you guys know with what I'm trying to do with the show, that's something I care a lot about. Now here's that second tribute I wanted to share.
This is a local news program where we only talk about local news. But Dolly Parton died today, and this is my show, and I love Dolly Parton. This is our producer Mallory's show, and she loved Dolly Parton. And this is your show, and there's a real good chance that you love Dolly Parton too. That's actually a pretty amazing thing in America these days. That me growing up in Western New York, almost Canada, Mallory growing up in Western Georgia, almost Alabama, and you from wherever you're from would all love one woman who grew up in East Tennessee, almost North Carolina. Dolly Parton was one of the last things that nearly all Americans loved. Set aside her musical talent for the ages, her sharp business mind, Dolly Parton was good, she was kind, she was joyful, she was generous. She knew that a fast way to make a friend was to make a joke about yourself. She loved to say that she wasn't offended by all the dumb blonde jokes because, as she said, I know I'm not dumb and I also know I'm not blonde. And how she used to joke about her famous figure, saying that she had little feet because nothing grows in the shade. Dolly Parton was what America aspires to be, up from nothing to astonishing success, not through conformity, but through originality. As she once told Barbara Walters, she'd never stoop so low as to be fashionable. And once she reached the top, she reached out to help others up. Her imagination library has gifted more than 300 million books to children. Her Christian faith led her to care for and to unify people, even when mockery and division were more in style. Her family announced her passing today, echoing the lyrics that she wrote in 1973, saying, "She will always love you." That was the thing. Whole lot of celebrities are loved. Dolly Parton loved you back.
I think it's fair to say that all of us are going to miss Dolly. Let's move now to Trump's poll numbers. Not to state the obvious, but they are rough. Check out this report.
Record low polling. A new projection showing President Trump's net approval rating is negative in 47 out of 50 states. According to The Economist and YouGov, Trump's net approval is minus 26. Going state by state, the data shows widespread dissatisfaction with Trump, even in places that voted for him in 2024. Ahead of the midterms, Trump has a negative net approval rating in all of the states where there are competitive Senate races this year. In Georgia, Trump's net approval is negative 31. In North Carolina, negative 25. In Maine, Trump's net approval is negative 31. In Texas, it's negative 22. And in Michigan, Trump's net approval is negative 27.
I mean, wow. In the negative in 47 of 50 states. There is an election in just a few months. We're down to basically 2 months. And Trump is in the negative in 47 out of 50 states. I will say, though, the good news is he has done a lot this past week to help his numbers. Wait. Oh my. No, he has not. He has done a lot that will hurt his numbers, and we're going to go through that stuff. And one of the larger bit of things happening behind the scenes is you increasingly hear a bit of a follow-up to the Natalie Harp story from last week, which blew up, which is that Trump is so insulated. He is so in a bubble that he does not realize what is popular or unpopular. The only thing he ever hears is that he's doing a great job, and here's a article that's positive that Natalie Harp will print off for him. He lives in this bubble. He's like the king that doesn't leave the castle, who thinks all of the serfs across the kingdom thinks he's the greatest thing ever as he increases taxes or announces wars. The president does not realize how unpopular he is. And all of his advisors are sycophants, and they will not tell him the truth. All of the cabinet members and advisors from the first term who would be honest with him, who were good counselors who would help him steer the ship and right the course if he made a mistake, they're all gone. And this is partly on him because he wants loyalty more than anything else. That is one of his weaknesses, because loyalty involves telling someone the truth when they have erred, and he has made many errors, but no one is telling him that. And in his mind, he thinks he's, as he said so many times, smarter than the generals. He thinks he's a genius. He thinks because he passes memory tests that are like pre-Alzheimer's tests and aced them, that he's a genius, and no one will tell him the truth. Here is a good, for example, or just a good data point that makes the larger point that I'm making. There was a big report in Newsmax, conservative outlet, that in July, ICE arrested 50,000 people. 50,000. That is the highest during Trump's second term. So they're literally ramping up arrests and enforcement. And as if that's not enough, they're also going to cancel 200,000 visa holders of folks applying for asylum. So this is a big number, 200,000. And need I remind you that while I will definitely grant that many Americans believed the border was an issue, and they have appreciated the president locking it down and tightening it up, there, on the other hand, are poll after poll that says many of these folks, actually I should just go ahead and be honest, it's most of these folks being arrested have not broken any laws. They're not the hardcore criminals. Now, I know that folks on the right say, hey, if you're here illegally, you've broken the law, and I get that. But a lot of them are either family members of, or married to, or engaged to U.S. citizens. They're people who've been here for 6, 8, 10 years or longer. And so with every arrest, with every enforcement of some of these rules, it is hurting those on the right who are running for re-election, because Latinos who supported Trump in strong numbers, that has plummeted. And with this increased enforcement, you're starting to see stories that really make the headlines. For instance, Military Times, not exactly a liberal bastion, it's a military newspaper. But the wife of an Army sergeant, I would say her name, but I don't really want to link, I don't want to put her name out there, but you can find this easily, has been deported to Honduras. So one of our soldiers had his wife deported. Another story, this one made even more news. One of the folks serving on the USS Abraham Lincoln, his father, while his son is out at sea defending us, fighting Iran, his father is arrested. His father has been in the U.S. for 19 years, has a work permit, has no criminal record, and was arrested by ICE agents as he came home from work that day. And again, his son is on the USS Abraham Lincoln. So these are just the kind of stories that if you're a Republican running for Congress and re-election in a couple of months, these are not the kind of stories you want highlighted. And I mean, not to be totally cynical, but I'll just be cynical, but even if your goal was to increase the arrest and the enforcement of some of these rules, you would think the president would tell his advisors, hey, let's slow it down a couple of months. Any of the controversial ones, like release them quickly, let's put water on the fire, so to speak. Let's just, we gotta low-key this for a little bit longer, see if we can't win some seats in November that we might have lost, and then we can crank it up. I mean, that would be the politically smart thing to do. But instead, they're ramping it up. I don't know what his advisors, I mean, I don't think they tell him the truth, but I don't know that any Republicans who are actually in close congressional, districts that are running for re-election, none of them think this is wise. They don't have the nerve to say it to his face, but none of them think it's wise. And 200,000? I mean, there will be some economic hits to the economy and to local cities and towns and counties from this move. I believe there will also be political consequences from this move. And again, it might be, obviously, it's legal to do what he's doing in most of these instances. These folks are here, they've either gone past the amount of time they were granted on their visa, or maybe they don't have the right documentation, or maybe they're waiting on an asylum claim. But again, he's going to take 200,000 of those and send them home. And so, again, maybe the 35% on the right of his hardcore base, maybe they want this. But there will be economic consequences. there will be political consequences. And this is going to cost President Trump. And it's going to cost the Republicans in November. You can mark that down. Now, here's the second big thing that will certainly make President Trump's numbers worse, since the poll results that already had him at a negative in 47 of 50 states. What am I referring to? I'm referring to the trade war that he has launched with Canada. Here is a quick summary on that.
Trade talks between the U.S. and Canada collapsed late Friday night, just minutes before a deadline, triggering 50% U.S. tariffs on roughly $20 billion worth of Canadian goods, including hockey sticks, building materials, liquor, and clothing. This morning, President Trump fired up Truth Social, said that even more tariffs were planned for January 1st, 2027. So he's making advanced plans now. 50% on cars, trucks, automotive parts, and steel. He says Canada will be treated like a state no longer. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, meanwhile, said the U.S. is at war with Canada over these tariffs. He's announced dollar-for-dollar retaliatory tariffs on U.S. steel, dairy, appliances, agricultural equipment, pulp and paper, electronics, and that it will be effective September 8th, which is soon. That is the day after Labor Day. Let's listen to a little bit of his speech from Saturday.
Last spring, I warned that America is trying to break us so they can own us. And I promise that that will never, ever happen. We are keeping that promise. Canada is becoming stronger and less dependent on America. We are already giving ourselves more than they can take away.
Why does it feel like today Mark Carney is going to war?
Because we're attacked. You're at war when you get attacked. We got attacked. U.S. put 50%. We waited until the United States decided to actually implement these so-called 338 tariffs. That's fine. We've got the reserves. We got the resilience. We've got the plan. We've got the focus. We will respond. We're going to focus on what we can control. We're going to build.
So this is interesting because while our economy is much larger, as I saw one analyst put it, Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, has spent the last 9 months making the case that Canada must fight back against the U.S. in order to ensure its survival. And Carney has a 70% approval rating. And everyone in Canada is so mad at Trump right now that they're willing to tighten their belts and go to, economic war, so to speak, against the U.S. Meanwhile, just like with the Iran war, President Trump has a very low approval rating, and most Americans don't even support this new trade war. In fact, there are Republican elected officials who are coming out against it and warning that, hey, this is not what we need while the economy is a little shaky. Meanwhile, the president has done something else that has again angered both his base and Republican elected officials. I'm referring, of course, to the news that the president is going to import in lots of beef from Argentina. 300,000 metric tons. And ranchers who clearly usually vote Republican are not happy about this. Neither are some senators and congressmen who are all Republicans. Let's start first by just listening to a rancher who went viral. This is a Trump supporter. Again, a beef rancher who went viral because he is not happy. So I'm going to play this clip, and then afterward you will hear longtime Republican Bill Kristol, who's not a fan of the president, but again, 30, 40 plus years of big time moves in the Republican Party. You'll hear what he says after this viral comment.
They're going to import a bunch more box beef, ground beef, scrap cuts, is what I call them, and hopefully bring down the price of ground beef in the store for y'all. Now this morning, the markets are crashing, and you're going to lose more ranchers, and in the long run, you're going to lose everything. because where there are cattle, there is freedom. And when these disappear, so does your freedom. I don't think this is going to work out like they hope.
MAGA Rangers are pissed.
I mean, this could have real political effects, couldn't it? In Nebraska, for example, and Kansas. Sad thing about tariffs, they do real damage. And you kind of get, once you start the business of imposing them and taking them off, you offend people both ways, right? And especially if the prices don't come down.
Now, while we're on this topic, before we leave it, I want to just share one more clip to remind folks just how much has changed in the Republican Party. But I'm a little sensitive to this because I've got to say that I remember when I was younger, while I was in the Marine Corps especially, and then early part of college, I really wasn't a fan of free trade. And it's easy to beat it up and not be a fan of it. But I used to always think, we lost our manufacturing base and we should just have tariffs. And so I know why a lot of people want to support it. And it's partly why it's so frustrating that Trump has been so inept with how he has pursued this policy. Because if you wanted to test it out, like the worst person to test it out under was Trump, because he rolled it out without congressional approval. Then the Supreme Court, of course, gave him as long as possible, but then they overturned it, and he just does things on a whim. It's just how he rolls. And we all know that an economic system needs to be stable, it needs to be predictable. And there might have been a way to test this, but he has completely destroyed that option for the next probably 20 years. So there's no stable, predictable way to do this. And any thoughts that even I used to have, and some of them were defense related, like the fact that we can't seem to make enough artillery shells or Patriot missiles or anything else to defend ourselves, has shown some of the weaknesses of how our, at least, military-industrial complex is spread across the world, especially with our Navy now down to 300 ships and overstretched. But the president has completely destroyed any chance of trying to do this the right way. Having said all that, I did not realize, and it's probably, it's an age thing, I'm 48, so Ronald Reagan I was pretty young when he was around. And I wanted to share this clip that Charlie Sykes had found. And he's talking about that conservatives have always been free trade and that Donald Trump is a populist and does not even follow the conservative line of thinking on free trade. Now, I know that with MAGA, there's a new trend where it's like, America first, put tariffs in place, and a lot of people do support them. But I thought it would be worth hearing what Ronald Reagan had to say about free trade. Again, this was found by Charlie Sykes, who you will hear in the beginning.
Walt, I want to leave you with this because I want to remind you that there's nothing conservative about Donald Trump's fetish for tariffs and trade wars. Look, don't take my word for it. Listen to what Ronald Reagan had to say about tariffs and free trade and the demagogues that don't support free markets.
Our peaceful trading partners are not our enemies. They are our allies. We should beware of the demagogues who are ready to declare a trade war against our friends, weakening our economy, our national security, and the entire free world, all while cynically waving the American flag. The expansion of the international economy is not a foreign invasion. It is an American triumph, one we worked hard to achieve, and something central to our vision of a peaceful and prosperous world of freedom. After the Second World War, America led the way to dismantle trade barriers and create a world trading system that set the stage for decades of unparalleled economic growth. Yes, back in 1776, our founding fathers believed that free trade was worth fighting for, and we can celebrate their victory, because today, trade is at the core of the alliance that secure the peace and guarantee our freedom. It is the source of our prosperity and the path to an even brighter future for America. Until next week, thanks for listening, and God bless you.
And of course, the worst part of all of this is how ham-fisted the president has been, how he has wrecked alliances with just running roughshod over threatening European allies, threatening Canada, putting up, maps that show that Canada with the American flag over it, and threatening Greenland. And I mean, he could not have executed the tariff policy any worse. And then, as if all of that isn't bad enough, there's lots of news out there that with the Canada part, they had a deal almost done. Everyone, in fact, thought that the deal was basically done. And then he sends a representative up at the end who wasn't even a part of the negotiations, who threw out more demands. And of course, no one knows if Trump told them to wreck it or to add these demands, or he has to always just crush every deal. There's no such thing as like a win-win with Donald Trump. It's got to be, I win and I destroy you, and I get to dunk on you in your face and then make fun of you and call you an idiot. That's how he thinks every deal's got to be. But the deal got wrecked at the end with one of our longest term allies. I mean, it's just, I just can't. I try to be as fair as possible, but I just can't sometimes. The amateur hour that happens every single week under the president's leadership. I probably should put air quotes under the word leadership. It's just, I just can't. Alright, before I go on too big of a rant, let's just keep the show moving. So let's talk about another bit of news headlines that will not help Trump's poll numbers. I mean, these are ugly headlines. And intuitively, most people used to care about this stuff, at least to some degree. Many of us have been hearing about it for 30 or 40 years. I'm referring, of course, to the debt, which has hit $40 trillion, and every single media organization out there has discussed the fact that we've hit 40 trillion, and we've done it under Trump. He gets to own a good portion of this, but people always blame the head coach or the president, whether it's gas prices, whether it's the debt, or whether it's 50 other things that sometimes the president doesn't even fully control. But those headlines have dropped. And so the question is, does the American public care? Does this stick to the president very much? And so who better to listen to than the great Tom Nichols and Charlie Sykes discussing this? I loved what they had to say, and honestly, catching a clip of them makes the show worth listening to. If you didn't catch this, just hearing this makes listening to my show worth it. Between the two of them, the number of decades of political wisdom they have is just impossible to really summarize or get your arms around. But here's what they say as they're talking about the 40 trillion that we've now hit, and then they move a bit into cultural issues, which is obviously something big on the right. And I will move right into my next topic after that about cultural issues. But here's what they had to say on this big news that we have crossed $40 trillion.
I want to start. We have a lot of really interesting stuff to talk about. I want to talk about a story that nobody actually cares about. People pretend to care about it, but I think the political reality is that nobody cares that the national debt just hit $40 trillion. Here's a little just statistical tidbit. The day that Barack Obama left office, the national debt was just a couple $100 billion below $20 trillion. $20 trillion when Barack Obama leaves office. It is now $40 trillion under Republican president, Republican Congress. And I bring this up because, as you know, I spent years in Wisconsin talking to people like Paul Ryan and Ron Johnson, who were warning about how terrible the national debt was, what an existential threat this was. And I don't know. I find this a little ironic that we've now hit $40 trillion under Donald Trump, who promised, if I recall correctly, that he was going to actually eliminate the national debt. Any thoughts about this, Tom?
Yeah, they didn't care. For the elected Republicans, I mean, I think we have to put this into three batches, right? You've got the elected Republicans, the voters, and then the kind of Trump and his inner circle group. For the elected Republicans, it was say anything to stay in power. Say anything you have to say to keep living in the Emerald City and having people bring you your coffee and pick you up for work and take your dry cleaning. And, look, you and I both know this. The life of an elected...
Good life.
It's a good life to be a member of Congress.
So at this point, they went on a little bit of a tangent. So I'm jumping from there. I promise you all of this is still in context, but I'm jumping from there to where they get back on the topic. And if you're skeptical and you're like, well, what were they talking about, Stan? Well, they were talking about how every congressman wants to stay in Washington, D.C. their entire lives because they don't really want to go back home and be normal. But I think most of us agree that's probably what happens to most people when they go to D.C., so I don't think you need to hear that part. Here's them jumping back into it.
So Trump in the inner circle, Trump's going, why does he want power? He wants to stay out of jail and he wants to enrich himself in his circle. That the rest of it, nobody cares about. And then you have the voters. And here's, where I have to put this back on the voters. The voters claim to care about deficits on immigration and, all of the hot button abortion, trans rights. But in fact, what they really care about is a big chunk of them, that kind of hardcore of 30% maybe that's left at this point, is owning the libs, getting back at people, shaking their fist at the TV while they're watching OAN or whatever the hell they watch. They didn't care. Nobody, in the end, nobody really cared about any of this stuff.
Yeah, because the Tea Party turns out not to really care about this, right? The Tea Party never really cared about debts and deficit, did they? The
Tea Party was as bullshit a movement as Occupy Wall Street was.
Well,
that'll make some people mad, I know, but I'm sorry, I was an anti-Tea Party guy from the jump because, again, as you say, none of that stuff mattered. It was all kind of primal yops of boomer angst back in 2008, 2009.
Well, I am. You have to understand the reason I'm bringing this up is I still have a little bit of PTSD from this period, but I probably spent more than 100 shows, talking about how dangerous the debt and the deficit was. I can't tell you, in his first term before he completely lost his mind, every time Ron Johnson went anywhere, he basically bored his audiences by showing them big charts about the debt and the deficit and how this was this cataclysm coming. And they're just sitting there and they've presided over this. Okay, so let's move on to something else.
Now, one thing that he mentioned was about the culture wars. And I will say that actually for folks on the right, that culture wars are a big deal. And I want to play a clip from Senator Ted Cruz, who was on the Benny Show. And the reason that this does matter is even if you try to minimize it, well, if it starts to infringe on the rights of some folks on the left, then clearly it matters to them. But it is an animating issue for folks on the right. And particularly something that's been in the news now for probably a couple of weeks and still going strong is the WNBA and Caitlin Clark and Sophie Cunningham and what she said and the trans issue. And I know folks on the left are like, we don't want to talk about bathrooms or this or that. But this is something that the right is just, it's a big issue to them. And even when people are mad about the economy, or I had a Trump supporter that is a big Trump supporter, and he told me recently, he's like, I wish he just shut his mouth. And he used the word shut his mouth. And even those who are frustrated with the president, the moment you bring up either trans, or if you bring up anything to do, sometimes even with gay rights, if you bring up anything to do with Islam, instantly most of the folks on the right fall back into line because they see all of those things as threats to either their family or their way of living. And so it is the issue that pulls together the right. And so clearly, if you're on the right, it's the one thing you can do to try to salvage the midterms. So just to reinforce the point I'm making, here's Senator Ted Cruz again on the Benny Show.
But by the way, Clay Travis has he initially offered $10 million out of his own pocket for the defending WNBA world champions to play a high school boys team, and he'd give $10 million to the winner. The WNBA has not taken up on it. Clay Travis then upped the ante. He said, all right, I'll give you $10 million for the defending champions to play an 8th grade boys team that I get to pick. Nothing but 8th grade boys against the defending champions. Absolute crickets from the WNBA. And look, the reason is obvious. There is a difference between men and women. At Judiciary Committee hearings, I've asked witnesses, tell me something. What does the W stand for in WNBA? And these leftists, that their ideology is so insanely inconsistent, they cannot answer that question.
Are you going to be bringing in the CEO of the WNBA, Kathy Engelbert, to ask this? Would you commit to doing that on the Judiciary Committee?
I think it is an excellent idea. I think it's an excellent idea.
I think it'd be must-see TV, Senator. I think we could get to the bottom of this.
I think I'd kind of enjoy seeing her testify next to Ennis Freedom Cantor.
Now there it is. That's the Judiciary Committee talking. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Great. Well, we look forward to that. We might even fly to DC for that one. That would be exciting.
So as you can tell, this is something that the right is getting mileage out of, and I don't expect them to stop anytime soon on the issues that they're pushing. So let's move to Iran now, and this is another story that will not help the president's poll numbers at all. First of all, there was the news that the Pentagon has updated the number of wounded or killed in the Iran war, and there are now more than 750 have been wounded. So that was a big increase, bringing home some of the additional cost of the war that the public hasn't really known about. So 750 plus wounded. Also, we're more than 6 months in. The Wall Street Journal, the conservative Wall Street Journal, had an article nearly 6 months later. A conflict with Iran that President Trump promised would be over within 6 weeks is continuing without a clear end in sight. Again, that was a conservative Wall Street Journal. The Economist had an article that said even if Donald Trump turns up the economic pressure to 11 on a scale of 10, Iran's economy is already struggling and its leaders will probably remain unbowed, meaning they're not going to give in. And then the final thing, the Strait of Hormuz, currently, New York Times had an article, it's averaging about 12 vessels a day, down from 130. We talked about this in previous weeks. The amount of oil flowing through is it's down, and this is going to affect not only our economy, but the world economy. So, no real good news happening out of Iran, no closer to a peace deal. In fact, in the past week, we have shown even more weakness. There have been several attacks from Iran on commercial tankers, and we're basically not even responding now. It's kind of embarrassing, honestly. Iran is flexing its muscles, and we're afraid for it to blow wide open again because we don't have enough interceptor missiles to protect the countries in the Middle East. Do I need to remind you that when President Biden withdrew troops from Afghanistan and showed weakness, that was the beginning of the end of his popularity? And I say this because the president's trying to delay it, but unless the Iranian economy somehow collapses in a way that no analyst is currently predicting, And again, I really hope I'm wrong. I would love for their government to collapse and for there to be freedom and for the people to have a chance to, freedom of religion, to not have to have a burqa and all the stuff. I would love for their government to collapse. But there's just no indications it's going to happen. And so this will continue to be a slow drain on the president's popularity until and or if he finally says whatever he's going to say, which essentially we have lost the war. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. But he will try to claim victory, I'm sure, at some point. And we've lost the war. We've got troops moved back. We've got bases destroyed. We've got Iran still picking at other countries. And we're basically not retaliating. I don't know how else you frame that other than a loss. Again, I wish I was wrong, but I just don't know how you frame it any other way. And again, I've said this numerous times, and not to beat a dead horse, but I am going to beat a dead horse. Because the only way we could win at this point is some type of all-out, full-scale action, maybe even ground troops. But the president is a salesman, and he said this would be easy. He did not prepare the country for this. He did not get allies on board. He is a salesman. He is not, in my opinion, a strong leader. And he, instead of, like at my company that I work at, with my day job, one of our number one principles is we underpromise, we overachieve. When we know something can be done in 4 to 8 hours, we tell folks 1 to 2 business days so that we have extra time. That's what most businesses do. The president did the exact opposite. He overpromised, and I don't really know what he was thinking. It's very frustrating, but again, I've tried to be fair to him. I know there are conservatives that listen. I want conservatives to listen. I'm sure that he thought that the people would uprise. He thought those strikes would perhaps win in the short term. People would uprise. I guess that's what he was thinking. He overpromised, and now here we are, and we're 6 months in, and we look very weak. We are very low on interceptors, and increasingly Russia and China and even North Korea are kind of pushing us around. And the president can say he gets along with North Korea, but we canceled training exercises that have gone on for 50 years. In Europe, not only will we not help Ukraine arm and defend itself, which would be a great way to help stop Putin, by the way, but Putin is emboldened, and we had to send our CIA director over there to try to meet with him. Oh, by the way, Putin stood him up and wouldn't even meet with our CIA director, but we sent the CIA director over there because Russia is increasingly escalating hybrid attacks across Europe. And because Donald Trump has made so many members of NATO mad, and because we've withdrawn some of our troops, we yet again have shown weakness, we look soft, and we have no answer. All of this kind of points to what conservatives were pointing to when people thought Kamala Harris would win election. They said she would get us into World War III. They said she would get us into a war with Iran. And what is increasingly kind of obvious is that even though President Trump was elected, he did get us into a war with Iran. And these countries are on the move. They look stronger than, I don't want to say ever, but they definitely look pretty strong. Now, Ukraine's doing a great job with deep strikes inside Russia, which is hurting its economy. But Europe doesn't seem ready for these increasingly hybrid attacks. There was news this week that China had, yet again with their IT skills, broken into multiple government agencies in the U.S., including the FBI and ones they shouldn't. We just look weak. The president went in saying he was going to stand up to China and promising brutal tariffs, but China retaliated so strongly. And because we upset our allies like Canada, and Canada signed deals with China and some of these other European countries that used to be our friends, the president made so many of them mad that we literally had to back down on our tariff war with China. It's just very frustrating. But I think no matter how you spin it, everyone agrees, like, we're moving toward an increasingly higher likelihood of some type of larger conflict. I mean, Russia is probing Europe with hybrid attacks. We sent our CIA director over there to meet with Putin. The last time we sent the CIA director, Russia invaded Ukraine. We warned them not to. That was under President Biden. We sent the CIA director to tell Russia not to do what we know they're going to do. They're going to probe NATO. And what will the U.S. do? That's the question. J.D. Vance doesn't care about NATO. The president barely, if at all, cares about NATO. Will we even respond? Will we show strength? Can we show strength? The crazy thing is our military could cut through the Russian forces quite easily. They are conscripts. They are exhausted by war in Ukraine. Ukraine alone has devastated Russian ranks, although there is talks that they may do a mobilization to get more bodies because the Ukrainian drones are just wearing out Russia. And so the U.S. could definitely deal with Russia or in any type of probing action it does. But every time the president talks to Putin, he shows, at best, deference and respect, if not friendship. And so Europe isn't sure that the president would even stand up to Vladimir Putin. In some ways, it would probably literally depend on the president's mood that day or what they were saying on Fox News. I mean, do you think the president would stand up to Russia? Do you think he would send more troops over there? I mean, it goes against partly his America First agenda. He certainly didn't show any strength against North Korea. Hasn't been a whole lot of strength shown against China and what it's doing in the South China Sea or its threats toward Taiwan. I mean, I'm always reminded of what we used to say in the Marine Corps, that if you want peace, you prepare for war. And we look weak right now. And we're talking about stuff like Cuba or Venezuela. And so I'm not trying to scare anyone, but we are creeping toward essentially a World War III, where more and more countries are getting pulled into these various conflicts. You've got China pouring in stuff into Iran. We've been helping Ukraine. All these countries are kind of interconnected. We know North Korea sent troops to help Russia in its war against Ukraine. I mean, they're all kind of on this consolidated, united path. And I have said for years that we should have sent air defense units. Certainly Europe should have, but I think even the United States. Adam Kinzinger, a Republican, said this, like, we should have had a no-fly zone. Now, when he said it, it was more dangerous because there were Russian planes flying over Ukraine. And so U.S. troops could have shot down Russian planes. But for the past 3 years, it has not been nearly that dangerous. Because they've only been firing ballistic missiles and drones and cruise missiles. And so we could have sent air defense units at some risk, yes. Could some of them be wounded or die? Yes. But we could have helped defend Ukrainian civilians. We could have shown strength. We could have pushed something into the UN. We could have tried harder to push for a peace deal. There's a lot of things we could have done. But instead, we brought Zelensky into the White House, and they tried to dress him down and embarrass him. Instead, Trump has been pulling troops from NATO, threatening NATO countries with not wanting to defend them. We've shown weakness. And whether you like Trump or not, if you want peace, you plan for war. If you want to be safe in a parking lot, you keep your eyes open, you look for potential threats, and in a perfect world, you are prepared to handle any type of threat. I mean, when I'm in a parking lot, I don't avoid looking toward danger. I stare at danger. I'm almost never not armed. And half the time, deterrence is all you need. You want the criminal to say, you know what, that guy doesn't look scared, and he's either crazy or he's probably packing heat. I mean, imagine if we had sent a squadron of F-16s or whichever aircraft you want to name and said, hey, we're going to help shoot down these drones that are coming toward Ukraine, toward its capital cities. Or hey, we're going to put air defense troops from the ground, Patriot batteries, etc., like American ones, defensive only. The war has to end, Vladimir Putin. What if we'd done that? What if we pushed more units toward the eastern flank of NATO as we speak and said, hey, we know you're going to try something. We are sending troops over. We are strong. Do not think we are weak. Do not think we are low on interceptors. Or maybe we are low on interceptors, but we've got armored divisions. We've got troops. We have grit. We are not scared of you. You are a paper tiger. Russia, your economy is the size of Italy's. You've been at war for 4 years. Ukraine alone has nearly whooped you from one end of the place to the other. We are not scared of you. But I don't see that response. It's like we've forgotten the Russian quote from, attributed to anyway, the Soviet leader Vladimir Lenin. Lenin himself saying, you probe with bayonets. If you find mush, you push. If you find steel, you withdraw. And of course, the meaning of that is you test an adversary. You push against their boundaries or their weaknesses with minor actions. You're probing, you're pushing that bayonet. And if they collapse or mush, then you keep pushing. If they resist strongly, if they're still, you withdraw. And the crazy thing is I think even President Trump's supporters would say, the man's a bully. President Trump is a bully. You'd think he would understand this concept and these ideas. But when it comes to Russia, or when it comes to China, I don't know if he senses their strength. I'm not sure what it is. But he likes to bully countries like Canada or some of the European countries or Denmark. And when it comes to strong dictators like North Korea or China or Russia, he just will not stand up to them. Now, I have no idea why. He just won't do it. All right, let's move away from that pretty terrifying topic I was just on, and let's talk about Hakeem Jeffries. As you've probably heard, although there's been a lot of news, so you might not have, but the minority leader for Democrats is Hakeem Jeffries, and he's from New York, and he stepped in it this week. And folks on the left are not happy with him at all. And it's crazy because most people think he will become the House Majority Leader in just a couple of months. Most people expect Democrats to take the House. The Senate's not as much of a guarantee, and, Democrats shouldn't, in theory, on paper, take the Senate, but there are more and more articles saying they might, just because the president is just running the country into the toilet. But Hakeem Jeffries, just a couple of months from becoming probably his, if not lifelong goal, definitely his goal of the past 5 years or more, just a couple of months out from getting that post of becoming majority leader, he has stepped in it, and he stepped in it pretty big with the base. I'm referring, of course, to the fact that he had a meeting with Jared Kushner, and the left has absolutely lost its mind about this. Just I mean, you get on any, especially if you get on Blue Sky, the amount of vitriol and anger at him it's really, like, it's pretty loud. They're more mad at him than it seems like they've been at Chuck Schumer, the lead Democrat in the Senate, and they've been pretty mad at him for almost a year plus now. But Hakeem Jeffries had a relatively secret meeting with Jared Kushner, and the left absolutely lost its mind. Tommy Vitor, one of the famous hosts with Pod Save America, big time, long time Barack Obama guy, clearly in touch with the base. He put a post up on X that said, Jared Kushner has no actual government job. He just uses his family connections to get money from Gulf autocrats and fund corrupt deals. The only way Hakeem Jeffries should work with him is with demands for documents and subpoenas. So that's just kind of a good look at how mad the left is. Like, they don't even want to meet with someone like Jared Kushner. They literally want the Democrats to take the House, and they want to issue subpoenas, investigate. And you know what? I totally get it, because there have been such rampant and widespread corruption that it's hard to even report on it. I've tried in some previous episodes, as you guys know. There's just so much that it's very difficult to keep your arms around it. The Democrats will have plenty to work with if they take the House. And after this meeting with Hakeem Jeffries, the fact that it went so poorly for him, you can be confident that those elected in November will be very keen to hold hearings, to subpoena officials, and to investigate, just to go all out on investigations. No doubt with the base. And honestly, it was this way with the Republicans when they weren't in power, and then they finally got power. If you go from anywhere from like Benghazi to, you can name different things, or back when Obama was there, and Salintra and some things, like, people on the left and even in the middle are mad at the president, and they want a lot of people held accountable. And this was a very early taste of just how badly folks on the left, and probably some in the middle, want accountability, and they want the truth to come out. Because there's been way too much stuff behind the scenes. Way too much smoke. We're not sure how much fire there is, but there's been a lot of smoke. And there's already been quite a bit of fire that people have seen. And so Democrats, this was their really first public bit of data. Although you could say maybe even some of the DSA candidates winning their primaries, but this was a very public sign that Democrats are furious, and if you're in the Trump cabinet or any Trump official who doesn't get a pardon, you are in for some rough years. And you better be saving up some attorney fees, because they're going to be calling you in front of Congress and asking you lots of questions. All right, let's move now to Ukraine. And I want to share just one quick thing that Wes O'Donnell, who's a great guy that covers so much defense news, He wrote an excellent article about the latest on Ukraine's air defenses. Ukraine has obviously, we've covered in previous episodes, they're limited on interceptors, on Patriots. And so President Zelensky's been trying to find some type of a solution. And Wes O'Donnell covered this week of that. And I've got a link to this in the Substack notes. Go show him some love. Click the link, sign up at a minimum for free for his Substack. He does great stuff. He covered that President Zelensky did announce this week that they did get some Patriots. Now, he did not say how many. We don't know how many. He also didn't say from where. But Wes O'Donnell covered that. But he also covered that Ukraine received some additional, these are the medium air-to-air missiles. They're called AIM, A-I-M, but the medium air defense missiles. And that they also had gotten confirmation that they will be getting some anti-air defense vehicles that are French-made. They carry 8 medium-range anti-air missiles with radars. They're pretty good vehicles. And so this is going to help Ukraine quite a bit. But Wes O'Donnell covered that. I got a link to it in the episode notes. And he's a great researcher, a great writer, a nice dude. And don't want to give away too much of the reporting, but he's all over that story, just like he's all over so many things. Also want to mention on the Ukraine thing that there's been no change in a story I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, that Ukraine is struggling to get its grain out. And if you want to see a map, The Economist put a map out of the grain corridor, they're calling it, where Ukraine is trying to get some of the grain out, but they're struggling. And it's also a great map that shows just what Russia currently controls in Ukraine, how Ukraine is isolating Crimea or the Crimean Peninsula. Just a good map. We talked a few weeks ago how Ukraine had hit so many Russian ships, like 100 plus, that even J.D. Vance was asking them to hold off. But Russia retaliated, started hitting some tankers that were carrying out lots of Ukrainian grain, which affects food prices around the world. But more importantly, if Ukraine can't get its grain out, it can't plant the next year's crop. So this is kind of a big story and just something that we have to keep an eye on. Before we wrap up, I want to take a minute to come back to something deeper. We spend a lot of time each week talking about the country, where we are, where we're headed, what's at stake. But if that's all we look at, it'll just wear you down. And the truth is, most of us don't think much about faith, or even about what really matters, until life forces us to. When we get that phone call, or that doctor's report, or the job that you thought was secure is suddenly gone, those are the moments that cut through the noise, that wake us up, that frighten us. So this is the part of the show where we step back, open scripture, and remind ourselves what actually matters. It's not politics, it's not personalities, it's something stronger than that. It's wisdom from God, carried across thousands of years. And I'll be honest, I haven't always believed it, but my life has gone better when I've turned to it, listened to it, and tried to follow its way. So if you don't care, I'm going to share a little from it, and I hope you'll stick around and listen. So this week, I want to talk about God caring for us. And just like last week, where I used a devotional from the Tim Tebow devotional, this week I'm using one of the other devotionals I read. As I said last week, on a good day, I try to read from 3 Bible devotionals in the morning. This one is called the Pocket Bible Devotional for Men. And the entry, not that I'm on the correct day or page because I don't do this every day as I should, but it comes from February 1st, and it's about God caring for us. And so the page is just, the summary title is He Cares for Us, meaning God. And so I want to read just a few verses from that page and then the summary section at the end. I think this will bless you. So let's start with those verses. The first one comes from Matthew. It goes, and you've probably heard this one. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. In fact, there's a famous Christian song, give you rest for your soul. This is from Matthew chapter 11, verse 28. Again, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Next, we're going to jump over to 1 Peter. The verse reads, give all your worries and cares to God, for He cares about you. Again, give all your worries and cares to God, for He cares about you. Like, stop trying to carry everything yourself. That's from 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 7. Jump back to the Old Testament, Isaiah. This is probably written about more than 1,000 years before. Reads, He being God, God will feed His flock like a shepherd. He will carry the lambs in His arms, holding them close to His heart. Again, God will feed His flock like a shepherd. He will carry the lambs in His arms, holding them close to His heart. That's Isaiah chapter 40, verse 11. Then we'll jump back to the New Testament in Matthew chapter 6. It reads, if God cares so wonderfully for wildflowers that are here today and thrown into the fire tomorrow, He will certainly care for you. That's chapter 6, verse 30. And the summary of that page, just about a paragraph, I want to read that. Reads like this. The Lord cares about us. He cares about His people all the time and everywhere. He is never far removed from His children. Never is He deaf to our prayers. Never is God busy with more important things when we call out to Him. He cares for us so much that we can give our burdens completely over to Jesus. He is strong enough to carry every load, even that of the whole world. Again, all of those verses and that summary came from the Pocket Bible Devotional for Men. I know we are all searching for that something that the world cannot feel, and I just strongly believe that ultimately God is the thing that we are all longing for. God is the thing that will give us the greatest peace and happiness and just sense of security that you can find. And so, as always, I always encourage you to get into your Bibles this week. I mean, the Bible is so powerful that the Roman Catholic Church tried to keep people from being able to read it. That's how powerful it is. A lot of people have died putting these words, these are the revealed words of God, onto paper. It is God speaking through 40-plus authors over thousands of years. And if it's, like I always say, if it's not real, if there's nothing to it, then you'll read it and you're like, this makes no sense. But I've read a lot of books from a lot of other faiths, and they didn't speak to me. And so I just challenge you to just get out your Bible this week and see if it speaks to you. I like to end the faith section each week by saying that if you're skeptical or you're not sure if what I've shared is true or not, I'd like to encourage you to read the Bible for yourself. Not secondhand, not through headlines or arguments. Just open it and read. I've linked a Bible resource page in the episode notes that talk about translations and a good place to start. But if you don't want to click anything or take the time to read that short explanation I provide, Just start with the book of Mark in the New Testament, and then read a little bit of Psalms or Proverbs each day. Let the text speak for itself. And if it's all a bunch of hooey or drivel, then you'll know pretty quickly that I'm off my rocker. But if it's the Word of God, then I think God will speak to you through the text. And I think if you're unsure, you shouldn't be afraid to read something. I know I've read many texts about Buddhism, Islam, other faiths, Hinduism, and none of those texts spoke to me. But the Bible did speak to me. And so my challenge is, open the book yourself. Read it as a skeptic. And see if it's full of absolute truths and feels like the Word of God. If you don't own a Bible or don't have one handy, there are free apps on your phone. There are bazillions of websites that have the Bible on it. So you can read it from your phone. One final word. If you're a veteran and you're dealing with depression, PTSD, or thoughts of suicide, please check out the link in the resource notes. We need you in this fight, and you cannot give up. After all, who is going to take care of your family someday? Do you really want your military friends to feel guilty they didn't check on you more? I know it's taboo to say that it's selfish, but it is selfish. There is a purpose for your life, and you're just dealing with a lot of pain right now that feels overwhelming. It can get better. Just do not give up. Thanks for joining me this week. If you'd like to support the work, there's a link in the episode notes. I always like to end each episode by saying that as you head into the coming days, try to be just a little kinder, both online and also out in the world. Remember that most Americans are good people, even if they vote differently than you do. Aim to be a little bit more disciplined this week than you were last week. Mentally, physically, and spiritually, raise the bar just a little. You don't have to be perfect. You just need to aim to be a little better than you were last week. When you fall short, forgive yourself quickly. Start again. Now, when the news discourages you, and I believe it will, because even on the best of weeks, the media is looking for bad news. But when the news discourages you, don't give up on this country. Try to remember that division weakens us. Unity strengthens us. This is wisdom, and it's also biblical. So guard what you feed your mind and your spirit. What you take in and absorb will shape what you become. Don't ingest poison. And that's mostly what cable news is. If you are a person of faith, make sure you make some time this week to spend time in your Bible. If you are not, try reading the Bible this week for the first time, or for the first time in a long time. You know what kind of results you're getting with what you've been doing. It might be time to try something new. Now, before we leave, I need to mention, on the off chance that you don't know, I am an author in addition to being a podcaster. I like to say that I write compelling stories that matter about courage, faith, and the fight for what's right. I've written a dozen books to date. They include military thrillers, police detective mysteries, or whodunits, war literature, a western. One of them is even a motivational self-help book. And I've been fortunate to have sold more than 70,000 copies to date. So if you're one of those who have purchased one of my books, I really appreciate it. All of them can be found for sale on Amazon. And if you are one of those folks out there who are wondering if you might like one of my books, I will say that the military and political thrillers are very similar to books written by authors Vince Flynn and Jack Carr. And then the crime ones, if you enjoyed Robert B. Parker's Spencer series or any of his books, then I'm confident you will like the crime ones as well. Robert B. Parker was a huge influence on my writing. Now, moving away from my books, I should also say, before we end the show, that if you believe in what I'm doing on this podcast, if you believe it matters in this moment for our country, you can partner with me on this mission to help keep the show independent and steady. You can do that either through a monthly or a one-time gift, and there are several ways to support the show. All of them can be found in the episode notes. But there's no pressure to do so, just huge gratitude if you do. As the Bible teaches, God loves a generous giver, but I don't want anyone giving out of compulsion or out of guilt. At any rate, thanks in advance for all of you who are supporting the show. Until next time, please stay hopeful, stay humble, and keep working to be the light in your corner of the world. You've been listening to The Stan R. Mitchell Show.